The wind howled through the towering pines, flinging snow into swirling chaos as Daniel Rivers tightened his grip on his daughter's gloved hand. They were still a mile from home, but the storm had arrived early, fast, furious, and unforgiving. Then Jasper, their lead border collie, stopped dead in his tracks, ears up, nose locked on something ahead. What he found would change everything. British Columbia winters could be brutal, but this year felt different. The storm had swept in from the Rockies without warning, blanketing the forest trails in knee-deep snow. Daniel and 12-year-old Ava had been hiking to set a wildlife sensor near the ravine, a routine father-daughter tradition. Now, their footsteps were vanishing behind them almost as quickly as they could be made. Home was a snug wooden cabin nestled in a clearing just off the logging road, far from any town. No cell signal, no neighbors, just forest and family. Daniel Rivers was a seasoned wildlife ecologist with a gentle voice and sharp instincts. He'd spent years tracking wolves and mountain lions through this wilderness, but nothing made him prouder than sharing it with his curious daughter. Ava, with her snow-dusted braids and determined green eyes, matched his spirit, brave, observant, and endlessly kind. Behind them padded two more dogs, Maisie and Leo, loyal, vigilant, and always in sync with Jasper. Jasper suddenly broke from the trail, barking once before disappearing behind a collapsed tree. Ava cried out, "Dad, something's wrong!" They scrambled through the snowdrifts, following the dog's excited whines. There, beneath a heavy tangle of branches, lay a small, bloodied creature, barely more than a lump of fur. Its eyes were glazed with frost, its ribs painfully visible. Ava gasped. "Is that a bobcat?" Daniel knelt quickly. "A kitten," he said softly. "No more than a few months old. She's freezing." He scanned the area. Blood trails led into the forest, vanishing into a ravine. He recognized the signs, an illegal steel snare, most likely. The mother was gone. Ava looked at her father with wide, pleading eyes. "She'll die if we leave her." Daniel hesitated. As a biologist, he knew the risks of interfering with wild animals, and this one was endangered, protected by provincial law. But this wasn't a lab decision. It was a moment of conscience, and a race against time. He peeled off his outer coat, wrapped the kitten carefully, and whispered, "Let's get her home." By the time they reached the cabin, the snow was falling so heavily it erased the world behind them. Rebecca Rivers, a skilled veterinarian with sharp hands and a calm presence, opened the door and froze. "You brought a bobcat into the house?" she asked, half in disbelief, half in dread. "She was going to die," Ava said quickly. "Please, Mom." Rebecca examined the kitten on the kitchen table. Severely hypothermic, dehydrated, malnourished, deep gashes on the paws, likely from a snare. Her chances are slim. Daniel fetched a towel-lined crate and gently laid the kitten inside. The dogs sat around it, silent and alert, as if sensing the fragility of the new presence. Ava crouched nearby. "I'm going to call her Blaze," she whispered, "because she needs fire to survive." Rebecca gave her a tired smile, then turned off the kitchen light. "She needs rest now. All we can do is wait." That night, the wind screamed through the trees, slamming ice against the windows. Inside, the cabin was quiet. Ava couldn't sleep. She kept listening for movement, for breath, for any sign from the crate. At dawn, she rushed down the stairs. What she saw made her freeze. Blaze was alive, and she wasn't alone. The tiny bobcat lay curled up in the center of a warm, furry circle. The three dogs had gathered around her during the night, their bodies forming a protective barrier. Jasper, the largest, had his head resting lightly against her side. Daniel came in behind her and stopped short. "Well," he said quietly, "I guess the family's made its decision." Rebecca, now fully in vet mode, checked Blaze's vitals. Her temperature's up, still weak, but there's a fighting chance now. She shook her head in disbelief. 3 herding dogs caring for a wild predator. Unbelievable. Daniel chuckled. They don't see a predator. They see someone who needs them. Ava beamed. She's one of us now. Outside, the blizzard still raged, but within the log walls of the cabin, a bond had begun to form, silent, fragile, and fiercely real. That night, Ava took a photo of Blaze curled beside Jasper and posted it to her nature blog. The caption was simple: "Sometimes family finds you in the storm." She didn't know it yet, but that post was the beginning of something much bigger. Blaze didn't meow. He didn't pounce. He didn't stalk prey like a cat. Instead, he trotted beside Jasper, sat on command, and guarded the door. He didn't know he was wild. He thought he was a dog. Weeks passed. The snow outside the river's cabin grew deeper, burying the fences and blanketing the trees. Roads remained closed, and the family remained isolated. But inside the cabin, warmth and oddity blossomed. The bobcat kitten they had rescued now shared meals with 3 border collies. Morning and night, Blaze moved with the pack. The cabin's wood floors echoed with the sound of clicking claws. Some dog, some not. The fireplace crackled, the scent of stew lingered, and Blaze napped with his head on Leo's back, tail twitching to the rhythm of dreams. Blaze was no longer the trembling creature found under the fallen tree. His fur had thickened, his paws healed, and golden eyes sharpened with curiosity. He was fast, lightning fast, and climbed anything in the house that stood still long enough. Jasper, the lead dog, had taken on the role of mentor, correcting Blaze with low growls and teaching him the unspoken laws of the pack. Leo and Maisie played with Blaze, chased him through hallways, and let him win tug-of-war, sometimes. Ava, the storyteller, captured every moment. She posted videos on her blog. The bobcat who thinks he's a dog, never expecting what would happen next. As Blaze adapted to life with the dogs, his identity blurred. He came when called. He waited by the door to be let out. He barked, or tried to, with a strained, raspy sound that startled everyone. He watched Ava toss a ball and raced after it like a retriever. Daniel, ever the scientist, observed with both awe and caution. "He's learning behavior through mimicry," he explained to Rebecca one night. "But it's dangerous. The more he becomes like them, the more difficult it'll be to ever return him to the wild." Rebecca sighed. "He's not just learning, he's bonding." Outside the cabin, nature remained indifferent. Blaze's instincts were still there, his reactions to sudden noises, the way his ears flicked toward sounds in the woods. But he had begun to ignore rabbits outside the window. He didn't want to hunt. He wanted to play. The videos Ava posted began to draw attention. It started with a few local wildlife enthusiasts commenting, "Amazing adaptation," or "Is this real?" Then a regional news outlet picked it up. The story spread, a wild bobcat behaving like a dog. Within days, thousands of views became millions. People wrote in, sharing similar stories of rescued animals, of bonds across species, of hope. Ava beamed at the attention, but Daniel grew uneasy. If the wrong people see this, Blaze could be taken from us. They began to receive messages from researchers, zoos, animal welfare officers. One name stood out: Liam Walker, a regional wildlife ranger. He sent a brief, formal message. "This bobcat appears to be in domestic care. That is a violation of provincial wildlife regulations. I will be conducting an in-person evaluation." The knock came one gray morning. Liam Walker stood tall in his government-issued parka, clipboard in hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Rivers, I'm here regarding the animal." Blaze, napping on a windowsill, leapt to attention. He didn't run. He padded over and sat beside Jasper, eyes alert, posture calm. Liam blinked. "That's him?" Daniel nodded. "I expected a caged animal. This is not what I expected." He stayed for hours, observed how Blaze responded to voice commands, how he played with the dogs, how he avoided meat and preferred Ava's cooked chicken and carrots. He even watched Blaze sit beside the door until someone opened it. At the end, Liam sighed. This is a highly unusual situation, but the law is clear. Wild animals cannot be raised in a domestic setting. Daniel protested. "We didn't choose this. He would have died." "I believe you," Liam said, "but I have to report this. You'll need to apply for a special wildlife exemption permit, and even then, it may not be granted." Ava ran into her room and slammed the door. That night, the family sat in silence around the dinner table. Blaze dozed under the table between Jasper and Leo. His tail twitched when Ava sniffled. "We have to try," Rebecca said. "We'll file the paperwork, gather testimonies, document everything." "I'll write to the Department of Wildlife myself," Ava whispered. "I'll tell them everything." She opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Her voice was steady. "This is not a pet, and he's not a danger. He's family. Blaze doesn't know he's a bobcat. He knows he's loved. Isn't that what matters most?" Over the next few days, Ava's story spread farther than they imagined. Her video, titled "The Wild One with a Dog's Heart," went viral. Celebrities shared it, conservationists debated it, lawmakers discussed it. And yet, the decision would rest in the hands of a department that still followed old laws. The family waited. Inside the cabin, Blaze continued his life, chasing snowflakes with Leo, snuggling against Jasper's thick coat, sleeping at the foot of Ava's bed. But above them all, a quiet dread hung like mist. If the permit was denied, they would lose him. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, stamped with the seal of the Provincial Wildlife Conservation Department. Ava didn't need to open it to know. She felt it in her chest, the same cold emptiness that came before a storm. Spring had come late to the valley. The snow was receding, and patches of brown grass peeked through the white. But inside the cabin, no one was ready to welcome the season. For weeks, they had waited for the decision that would decide Blaze's fate. The cabin felt frozen in time, quiet, fragile. Blaze sensed it too. He no longer bounded through the halls with playful energy. He stayed close to Ava, close to the dogs, always watching. Ava's once sparkling spirit had dimmed. She spent her afternoons lying beside Blaze, reading aloud, hoping her voice would cover the dread in her heart. Rebecca baked too much, then left things untouched on the counter. Daniel tried to pretend things were normal, recording Blaze's behavior, cataloging his movements, but his notes grew shorter each day. Even the dogs felt it. Jasper lay near the front door for hours, as if waiting to block whoever might come to take Blaze away. The permit was denied. The letter was short, courteous, cold. While we acknowledge the unique circumstances, Blaze is a wild animal. His presence in a domestic setting remains a violation of conservation policy. He must be surrendered for reintroduction into an appropriate wilderness environment. No appeal, no discussion. Blaze would be removed from their home and released 100 miles away in a designated wilderness zone. A GPS collar would be used to track his movements. The department assured the family it was the most humane course of action. To Ava, it felt like exile. They were given 3 days to prepare. Rebecca packed a small bag of Blaze's favorite food, cooked chicken, rice, even a toy Ava had sewn for him. Daniel cleaned out the old wildlife carrier, reinforcing it for transport. But it was the dogs who reacted most. Jasper began to bark at any car that passed, even on the distant road below. Leo refused food. Maisie scratched the floor near Blaze's bed, as if digging to keep him from leaving. Ava didn't speak much. But on the night before the separation, she crept downstairs, curled beside Blaze, and whispered, "Don't forget us. Please, don't forget." The release site was a protected valley with clean streams and open meadows, remote, safe, but far from home. Liam Walker met them at the forest border, wearing a solemn expression. "We've tagged him with the GPS collar. It's non-invasive. We'll track him for 2 months." Daniel carried Blaze's crate to the open field. The bobcat didn't struggle. He just stared at the trees beyond, then back at the family. When the cage opened, Blaze stepped out slowly. He sniffed the wind, his body tense. Then he turned, looked directly at Ava. It was the same look he had given her the day they first met in the snow. A question, a farewell. And then he was gone, vanishing into the trees like a shadow swallowed by the wild. Ava collapsed into her mother's arms. That evening, the cabin was silent. The dogs refused to come inside. They lay on the porch, facing the hills, waiting. Ava didn't touch her dinner. She opened the GPS app, tracking Blaze's dot as it blinked, moving slowly, cautiously through the wilderness. "He's finding shelter," Daniel said gently, but Ava barely nodded. Over the next few days, Blaze's trail moved, across creeks, over ridges, stopping often, never in one place long. He was exploring, but not aimlessly. His path curved, turned, bent, homeward. "He's coming back," Ava said on the 5th day, pointing at the map. Rebecca looked uncertain. It could be coincidence. Daniel wasn't sure what to believe, but one thing was clear. The path was not random. Day 12, Blaze had crossed rivers, avoided towns, braved predators. His icon on the map moved steadily toward the valley. Then, silence. The signal stopped. The GPS collar had failed or broken. The last ping was only 40 miles from the cabin. Daniel and Ava drove to the last location, searching until dusk. They found only a broken strap caught on a branch. No tracks, no blood, no signs. For the next 3 days, hope hung by a thread. Ava barely slept. The dogs refused to eat. On the 3rd night, as they sat down for dinner in silence, Jasper suddenly stood up, rigid, alert. He barked once, and then they all heard it. The sound of claws on the porch, a shadow at the edge of the trees, a golden pair of eyes glowing in the moonlight. "Blaze?" Ava whispered. The bobcat stepped into view, thinner, muddy, his collar gone, but alive. He had come home. He had no map, no compass, no words, but against all logic, all scientific understanding, Blaze had done what no one believed he could. He had come home. It was a cold, windless night when Blaze reappeared on the porch of the River's cabin. The snow had long melted, replaced by wet earth and blooming pine, but the ache of his absence still lingered in every creak of the wood, every empty corner of the home. Now he stood at the edge of the porch, thinner, dirt-streaked, limping slightly. Yet in his golden eyes there was no fear, only recognition, only hope. The door swung open. Ava didn't say a word. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks, as Blaze stepped forward and gently pressed his head into her shoulder. Behind them, Jasper let out a low, contented sound, a deep exhale. The pack was whole again. Blaze's return changed everything, not just for the Rivers family, but for everyone who had followed his story. Ranger Liam Walker arrived the next morning, stunned by what he saw. He crossed nearly 100 miles of terrain, Daniel explained, voice low. 2 rivers, 1 highway, multiple bobcat territories. The GPS data confirms most of it. Rebecca added, "We don't know how he did it, but he did." Ava knelt beside Blaze as he slept among the dogs. "He didn't come back to a place," she whispered. "He came back to his family." But love wasn't enough to break the law. Liam made calls, meetings were held, The story was picked up by national networks. The Bobcat Who Walked Home. Conservationists were torn. Scientists were baffled. Thousands signed petitions. At the center of it all was one question. Could an animal born wild, but raised by love, be considered more than a legal anomaly? The Department of Wildlife announced they would send a senior director to evaluate Blaze's case. One last time. The visit came quietly. No reporters, no cameras. Dr. Elaine Barker, Director of Wildlife Conservation Programs, arrived at the river's cabin one early morning. She wore a heavy coat and a serious expression. But as soon as she stepped inside and saw Blaze curled up between Jasper and Maisie, watching her with calm, steady eyes, something shifted. Over the next hours, she watched Blaze chase Leo across the yard, return to Ava when called, and curl up beside her as she read. She noted how he ignored wild scents at the edge of the property, how he sat to be let inside, how he guarded the door. "This is not typical Bobcat behavior," she said. "This is a bond." Daniel handed her a file of documentation, videos, behavior logs, medical records. "We didn't try to tame him. We just didn't let him die." Dr. Barker closed the folder. "This will require an exception, one that's never been granted before." 1 month later, the final decision arrived. Blaze would be allowed to remain with the Rivers family under a new interspecies social bonding permit, the first of its kind in provincial wildlife history. The conditions were clear. Blaze would live in a semi-natural outdoor enclosure connected to the house. Regular behavioral checkups by a wildlife officer. Educational outreach would be conducted using Blaze's story to promote compassion and awareness. Ava screamed with joy. The dogs barked and jumped around her. Blaze, sensing the energy, leapt into her lap, sending them both tumbling into the grass. Freedom had been returned, not by law, but by love. The next year transformed the River's cabin into something more. What was once a home became a hub. Students visited. Biologists arrived from universities. Blaze became a case study in cross-species behavior. Daniel published a paper in Nature Wildlife Review. Rebecca gave talks at veterinary conferences. Ava, now 13, spoke at her school and launched a wildlife blog, Blaze's World. She ended every post with the same words. "Family is not where you are born, it's where you are loved." Blaze thrived. He grew larger, stronger, more agile. But he never lost the things that made him different. He still waited by the door, still curled up with Jasper on cold nights, still chased Ava's shadow when she walked across the field. On a clear spring morning, Blaze climbed to the highest rock in his enclosure, the same place he watched the valley every night. Below, Ava played with the dogs. Daniel sat on the porch, coffee in hand. Rebecca watered the garden. The world was quiet, whole. From that high place, Blaze looked out, not toward the wilderness, but toward the home he had chosen. There, under the open sky, stood not just a bobcat, not just a miracle of adaptation, but a living truth. That love is not bound by species. That instinct can be rewritten by care, that even the wildest heart can find where it belongs. And in that moment, the journey was complete.